verse 1 of Genesis 22. It says, "After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham.' And he said, 'Here I am.' He said, 'Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you.'" And the title of my sermon is going to be "Put It on the Altar." And so that's the beginning. If we skip to verse 9, it says, "When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood." So basically, relating this to our life is oftentimes God, he speaks to us and tells us that there are some things per se in our life that we need to lay down on the altar. In Abraham's case, it is Isaac, his son. He had only one son that him and Sarah, his wife, they were praying for 25 years. And God tells him to basically sacrifice him on the altar. And the same in our lives. There are things in our lives that God tells us to sacrifice on the altar. For example, it could be like a job, or it could be a sin such as an addiction or money or anything, whatever can be in your case. He tells us to put on the altar. And Abraham actually put him on the altar, which is, I think, is pretty crazy considering what it took for him to get the son in the first place. And so my question to you guys is, what would you do in his case if you've been praying for a son per se for 25 years and you receive him, and then God tells you to sacrifice him on the altar? What would you do? Or what would you do in your case where God tells you to give something up? Do you argue with God, or do you give it up and put it on the altar? If we skip to verse 15, it says, this is after, so Abraham puts him on the altar. Then the angel of the Lord comes and tells him basically not to kill him. And verse 15 says, "And the angel of the Lord came the second time from heaven and said, 'By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice.'" And so imagine only if Abraham did not obey God, what would happen then? If, he wouldn't get the blessing, obviously. And probably Abraham's future and his descendants would probably not have descendants, or not as much, and they would not be blessed. Because it says, because he obeyed him, they were blessed. And I just kind of think that sometimes we, in our lives, we don't consider the consequences of what may happen if, per se, God tells us to do something and we kind of disregard it and then do our own thing. We, by chance, can basically skip out on God's blessing and basically rewrite our future in a bad way somehow. By disobeying God. And so you can ask yourself, this is usually what I ask myself if I run into these kind of situations, is how important is this sin, or how important is this job compared to God's blessing? Because ultimately, everything good comes from God. So if there's something not good in your life and it's not from God, and God's telling you to get rid of it basically, and you still argue with him, and you choose the wrong thing, then you will basically not get God's blessing at the end. And also another thing to add is, it says, Oh, it said also that God provided a ram for him to sacrifice after. And so another thing is um, not only will you be blessed that you choose to lay per se your sin on the altar, but God will also provide for you. For example, if you lay down your job per se, okay, you had a job and then you couldn't come to church on Tuesday, or you had to skip practice or something, and God tells you to give it up, and then you actually do give it up, God will bless you in return even more. If you had sin in your life, God will give you perseverance and eternal life. He'll give you much more. If you notice, they make a lot of emphasis on your one and only son, or the one whom you loved. Basically, he had, well, in this situation, he had one son. I don't know if he had any other sons at the moment, but he had one son. And since he chose to listen to God, God turned that one son into many nations. And I think that's significant, especially if we relate it to our life, that if you do give something up, God will multiply in such a way that your life will be so much better. And also, basically, uh, relates to, Jesus Christ, how he came and died. Just one of him died for all of us so we can be in eternity with him. And basically, in conclusion, trust God like Abraham did. I'm sure it wasn't a easy decision for him to do. That was his only son, and so is for Jesus Christ, right? That was a hard decision for him. He prayed, he prayed if this cup can pass him, paraphrasing, but he still said, "Let it be your will and not mine." So basically, trust God and put it on the altar, whatever it is, and just know that everything good comes from God.